Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. It's always busy in Washington, D.C., even with the Christmas holiday coming. I'll give you the update on the latest with the CR shenanigans and other developments, and a new story out of the Wall Street Journal about how Joe Biden's been completely out of it since the day he entered office. You won't be shocked, but you're going to be infuriated by the cover-up. Secondly, we have major developments in our case against Fani Willis, a court hearing that I'm going to give you exclusive clips of to help you understand the lawsuit we have to expose the lawfare abuse targeting Trump involving Fani Willis, Nancy Pelosi, and the Biden gang. So a lot going on. First up is, it's been in the news, obviously. It's the story of the week. It's the budget fight in Washington, D.C. And as I've been noting since really the time Republicans have taken control of the House, they've been continuously promoting continuing resolutions that effectively fund everything they say they're against. And right now, they are in the midst of another continuing resolution fight as we speak. They're beginning to take the vote. Maybe we can have the vote by the time the show ends as to whether the government's going to be shut down or not. Let me see what the nays are. It's hard to tell what the Democrats are doing here. So the Democrats largely vote against this bill. It looks like it won't pass. So what had happened was the continuing resolution, again, brought up at the last minute to essentially ensure everything that Biden wants is funded for the next several months. Plus, there were these add-ons related to disaster relief and the farm bill. And as I noted on Twitter, they had a special exemption for members of Congress. They didn't have to be part of the Obamacare exchanges anymore. So it was, just insult on top of insult for the taxpayer. And I've been highlighting for years, and we've kind of been rerunning old videos of mine talking about previous continuing resolutions, and things haven't changed. And this is my most recent report on the continuing resolution fight. Well, once again, it looks like the Republican House is trying to push forward a continuing resolution that largely funds virtually everything they say they opposed when they ran for and took or kept control of the House of Representatives. This has been going on for 2 years now. So now we're going to have a continuing resolution that funds the Biden invasion, that funds censorship, that doesn't cut the budget, continues the inflationary pressure on your pocketbook, and continues to fund the corruption of the Biden administration and the lawfare against President Trump. So Elon Musk and President Trump have stood against this continuing resolution, but you, the voter, need to have your voices heard as well. So share your views with your congressmen and your senators at 202-225-3121. 202-225-3121. So I don't know what's going to happen now on the Hill, but this is, you may be wondering, why is Judicial Watch talking about budget issues? Well, first of all, because big government means big corruption. Secondly, this process is inherently corrupt. It ensures little oversight, little accountability, let alone little knowledge as to what the government is funding. You can't vote for $1 trillion bill as any normal human being and pretend to know what you're doing. It's the opposite of self-government. It's like putting something on a train and just let it go down the tracks, and no one cares what's going on. Year after year, that's what's been happening with these continuing resolutions. And as a result, the worst of government corruption and abuse has been funded with little check by the Republican-controlled House. They fund the Biden invasion. This bill will fund the Biden invasion. Censorship, no regulations, nothing in this bill will stop the continued censorship by the Biden gang of American citizens. It funds continuously the lawfare against President Trump. Justice Department still gets money to harass Trump. No curtailing of DOJ or federal funds for those jurisdictions harassing Trump still, or other jurisdictions targeting Trump supporters in retaliation. And the list goes on and on. Everything Republicans ran against in retaining control of the House, to retain control of the House, they're now fully funding or about to fully fund. Now, I don't know if they're going to fully fund it right now because it may not pass. And I don't think a government shutdown would be the end of the world. I understand why some may not want, and I understand personally that this is a tactical debate. Could a principled conservatives say, oh, I agree with Tom, but we just have to get over this hump so we can deal with these issues under the new Trump presidency? And, from my perspective, the answer is no. I don't think I would miss or not take advantage of the opportunity to leverage this debate to get some good policies put in place immediately. I don't think we can wait to stop the invasion. Every day it happens, our country's put at risk, for example. What about voter integrity? We're going to wait? And so, and I think if the government shut down through the Trump presidency, so Trump comes in, and then they deal with the issues. They get the cuts. They have control of the Senate, and they're in a better position to deal with this debt ceiling. So the debt ceiling thing is something that Trump is anxious about because the deal to essentially eliminate the debt ceiling, which is to me an abomination, the deal was, expires in January of 2025. So to typically increase the debt ceiling to allow more government deficit spending and debt is always a political quagmire or political nightmare for those having to agree to it. And Trump, for obvious reasons, doesn't want to deal with that. But I think he's better off dealing with it then because I don't think the debt ceiling should be increased without concurrent cuts in spending. I mean, if you're a credit card company, if you went to your credit card company and said, I want my debt to be increased, my debt limit to be increased, and you're already maxed out to the tune of $36 trillion in the case of the U.S. government, what do you think your credit card company would say? Well, A, show me the money. You've got to, are you buying down your debt? Are you decreasing your debt? That's one way to increase your debt limit. Or you tax the heck, in the case of the government, out of citizens to bring in more revenue, which is usually self-defeating. There's never enough net revenue. It's always about spending. Government debt and deficits are always about spending. It's never that there's not enough revenue, because revenue always increases, practically speaking. It's the spending that increases at a rate greater than the revenue that is the problem. So you go to a credit card company and just make a demand, increase my debt limit. They would tell you to go jump in a lake without reassurances that you're capable of paying down the debt and handling the increased debt load. And yeah, it is government corruption to spend money you don't have in a way that's out of control. Debt financing isn't necessarily corrupt, but to the extent it's used in our federal government, it is corrupt. And you have a banana republic, the elements of a banana republic obviously occur when you have politicians like Joe Biden trying to jail Donald Trump, right? That's banana republic style politics. What is the other indicia or indicator of a banana republic? Spending that's out of control. And I tell you, given the debt we have, our financial system could collapse. Our government finances could collapse at any time. That phrase, the full faith and credit of the United States? That could disappear at any time, given the amount of debt we have. So getting back to the CR, I don't know, let's bring up the CR vote here. Where are we on it now? Oh, so the Democrats are voting in numbers for the continuing resolution, which suggests it will pass. So they'll probably pass it looks like, and it will be another example of Republicans and Democrats working together to fully fund the Biden agenda. As a conservative, I find that disconcerting, to put it mildly. But the good news is the public is more sensitized to this. The fact that it went down in flames initially when the 1,500-page bill came out is a good thing. Musk got on it, Vivek Ramaswamy got on it, the Doge crowd got on it, and then President Trump got on it. And as a result, it was modified significantly. So it's less bad than it was on Wednesday. But I wouldn't vote for a continuing resolution. And of course, you've got to share your views with your congressman. Because a lot of these Republican congressmen, they're going to do the establishment thing. You can call your congressman, call your senators. All you have to do is call the Capitol switchboard and ask to be put through. 202-225-3121. This is not going to be the first budget fight. Remember, the House of Representatives, I think the Republicans will have a 2 or 3 seat margin, which may be the smallest. Someone pointed out the other day that Republicans have a greater margin in the Senate than they do in the House. Which is pretty extraordinary when you think about it, right? So it's always going to be a close run thing in all of these fights as we move into the Trump administration. And frankly, the way this has been handled doesn't augur well for how things will be handled next year. But we'll see. We'll see. So after the election, all the stories come out now, right, that are inconvenient to the establishment. Last week, we talked about how the Department of Justice Inspector General released a report documenting 26 confidential human sources of the FBI operators, agents, not literally agents, but they're operators and employees, typically of the FBI, meaning they often get paid, were at the Capitol on January 6th. 4 of which entered the Capitol. So that story was sat on by the corrupt Justice Department and the corrupt Inspector General's office until after the election, because it would have been helpful to President Trump if that information had come out. And it would not only have been helpful to him politically, but legally, because of the targeting of Trump on his alleged involvement, even though there was no involvement in the rioting by Trump. But that IG report showed that there were folks who could have been prosecuted by the Justice Department who were actually working for the FBI as confidential human sources. And yet they're going after Trump but letting these FBI guys off? No wonder they held it until after the election. Well, we have something else that was held to after the election. And it's an admission through a story in the Wall Street Journal about how President Biden has been completely out of it mentally since the moment he got into office, and how our government's been essentially run by White House aides and advisors. And to me, that only scratches the surface, because we know those White House aides and advisors don't operate in a vacuum. They're talking to someone for direction and collaboration in how to proceed, and you can guess who I think that is. But the story's pretty incredible, and I think it should be the basis for a series. Certainly Judicial Watch will investigate it as it's able to, as we're able to do. But if Congress has any competence, they will investigate what went on here too. It says essentially that he wasn't even meeting with his cabinet. He wasn't meeting with key cabinet officials. He wasn't meeting with key members of Congress. Aides were doing the work of the President of the United States. So you vote for a president and then he's completely AWOL because of a mental incapacity? I don't know about you, but that's like one of the worst corruption scandals in the modern era, on top of all these other corruption scandals. I got some select excerpts. I went through it. So it started, by the way, when he was running for president. He couldn't even handle the first campaign for president. The president's slide had been hard to overlook. While preparing last year for his interview with Robert Hur, the special counsel who investigated Biden's handling classified documents, the president couldn't recall lines that his team discussed with him. At events, aides often repeated instructions to him, such as where to enter or exit a stage, and issues that would be obvious to the average person. Biden's team tapped campaign co-chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg, a Hollywood mogul, to find a voice coach to improve the president's fading warble. A sign that the bruising presidential schedule needed to be adjusted for Biden's advanced age had risen early on in just the first few months of his term. Administration officials noticed that the president became tired if the meetings went long and would make mistakes. They issued a directive to some powerful lawmakers and allies seeking one-on-one time. The exchanges should be short and focused, according to people who received the message directly from White House aides. Ideally, the meetings would start later in the day, since Biden had never been at his best first in the morning, some of the people said. His staff made these adjustments to limit potential missteps by Biden. If the president was having an off day, meetings could be scrapped off altogether. In the spring of 2021, a national security official explained to another aide why a meeting had to be rescheduled. He has good days and bad days, and today was a bad day, so we're going to address this tomorrow. Our president of the United States was incapacitated. That's what the story shows. And unable to function as president of the United States, as commander-in-chief. You know, when the courts talk about the president's powers as under the Constitution, they note those powers are at its apex when he operates as commander-in-chief. It's kind of a further confirmation that it's arguably the most important thing the president does. The life or death decision making he's required to make as commander-in-chief, and he was unable to do so for 4 years from the beginning of the administration, at least according to this story. Now, through the story, the Biden gang pretends that all the reporting's wrong and it's not persuasive at all. And this is a particular troubling instance of it. Congressman Adam Smith tried to share his concerns about the Afghanistan withdrawal prior to it happening. Now, Smith is, or was, the chair of the Armed Services Committee, so he's a powerful Democrat on the defense side. Of course, first of all, Smith never told anyone else about this until it was too late, so I'm not taking his side on it. But the fact is, he was trying to talk to Biden, and they wouldn't let him talk to him. And then, of course, the surrender in Afghanistan happened. 13 Americans were killed, countless others injured, thanks to Joe Biden's surrender to the Taliban, the worst defeat in American history. You'd have to go back to the War of 1812 to find something comparable. And then finally, Biden calls him after the fact. I mean, that's how restricted Biden's access to key people were. Imagine the chairman of powerful Democrat committees not being able to talk to their party's president. What else did I pull out here that was outrageous? Treasury Secretary. You know, it's like the Secretary of Defense, the Treasury Secretary, the Secretary of State. Those are kind of core cabinet officials. Those are the most here in D.C., and I think constitutionally speaking, they're the most significant cabinet agencies. The Treasury, Department of Defense, Department of State. Treasury Secretary Yellen had an arm's-length relationship with the president for much of the administration. The Treasury Secretary having an arm's-length relationship with the president? No wonder our economy went into the pot. I don't even know if that's the right metaphor, but you know what I mean. She was part of the economics team that regularly briefed the president, but one-on-one discussions were more rare, and she typically dealt with the National Economic Council or with the president's advisors rather than Biden directly. So another way to read this is that, you know, the Yellen was basically the president for her area, the Treasury. She wasn't receiving direction from the president by this account. In the fall of 2023, and this comes back to a Judicial Watch issue, and I'll talk to you about that. In the fall of 2023, Biden faced a major test when the special counsel, wanted to interview him. The president wanted to do it, and his top aides fed his willingness to sit down with investigators set up a favorable contrast with Trump. The prep sessions took about 3 hours a day. During these sessions, Biden's energy levels were up and down. He couldn't recall lines that his team had previously discussed with him, so that he couldn't follow the testimony they were feeding him, which raises other legal issues. A White House official pushed back on the notion that Biden's age showed in prep, saying the concerns that arose during those sessions were related to Biden's tendency to overshare. Well, that's a nice way of describing someone who's completely out of it and says things that are irrelevant. The actual interview didn't go well. And of course, famously, found him to be a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. And to this day, they're hiding the audio of that interview from us because I guarantee you it shows quite dramatically in an audio way President Biden's inability to function. So this story is devastating, and it's devastating in a number of ways. And it goes on to talk about how donors were surprised at Biden's behavior. They were given cards to read. They couldn't even ask normal questions. They had to read questions from a card, and even then, Biden was unable to answer them. So the corruption here is kind of broad, right? You had the media involved with this. You had government officials at the highest levels covering up for Biden's inability to function. And you had Republicans refusing to do their duties under the Constitution to protect the nation and our national security from the risk entailed to having a commander-in-chief who's dysfunctional, physically, mentally unable to perform the duties entrusted to him by the American people, over which lives are riding. And you may recall, I was calling on the Republicans to do something about the 25th Amendment, begin the process of investigating this. Now, I'm sure, maybe they'll do hearings about it now. Maybe they'll ask what happened. Why wasn't Trump, why didn't the vice president and the cabinet take steps to find him incapable under the 25th Amendment? But this is a scandal for the ages again, where we've had a president unable to perform his duties for 4 years, and the corrupt political class here in Washington, D.C. refused to do anything about it. Attack those who raised questions about it. Attacked American citizens who could see his dysfunction. And finally, when it became inconvenient or useful to them, they admitted, maybe he can't be president anymore, or at least can't run for president anymore. And yet for months now we've had this admission he's not able to function to be a candidate, but he's able to function to be a president. Now, is it too late to institute the 25th Amendment? Technically, no. Practically, probably yes. But pray for America, because no one's watching the store. At least no one you voted for is watching the store. So this is a scandal because of the danger it put the United States in, and I think we recognize that danger because we see the consequences of it in Afghanistan, in Russia with the invasion of Ukraine. You don't think the calculation of Biden being out of it has a national security implication? It invites aventurism by our enemies. It invites violence. It invites attacks on America. And it invites a weakening of America's ability to influence others, or it results in that. And that's why we've had a more aggressive China. That's why we've had the invasion of Ukraine, I'm convinced. And plus, of course, the Chinese adventurism and aggressive behavior, and Putin's aggressive behavior, I think, is also in part due to Biden's personal corruption issues with both countries. The Biden family was on the take from both countries. So it's corruption related to his mental incapacity and corruption related to his family. What a mess. What a mess. And so we've been in litigation on all of these issues, and Congress has been out to lunch on much of it. They didn't even want to impeach him. We didn't even get the leadership in place to impeach him. That's how weak the opposition in this country was to the craven opportunists and power mongers running the Biden administration. Because these are folks who are exercising powers no one gave them because the president was dysfunctional. I don't know. You know, this is what I love about our ability to give this report to you, because no one else is going to talk about it the way we do, right? Or at length. You know, you get commentators talking about it in passing and comments on social media, which is all well and good because many Americans wouldn't know about it but for social media these days. So thankfully we can have other ways of reaching out. But this is a major scandal. I mean, just like the coup against Biden was a major scandal. I mean, 15 million votes erased, and we're supposed to pretend it's normal. It's not normal. And there may be significant legal and constitutional issues about what went on in the 2024 election. So as far as I'm concerned, we've got 2 elections to investigate. I know Trump's interested, or his people should be, in what happened in 2020. Heck, they're trying to jail him over it, or were, and still are. But the 2024 election, how Kamala became the nominee, I think there are legal issues there. Before I get to the big part of the program, I want to remind you, we've got a great book out. You can still get it, last-minute Christmas gift, Rights and Freedoms in Peril. And, you know, you should just buy the book because it's great and educational. But, if you want to understand why I get so ticked about everything, you're going to want to read this book. And I try to explain it in this video. Let's run it. Hey everyone, so much heavy lifting needs to be done to protect our constitutional republic, and my new book, Rights and Freedoms in Peril, make that heavy lifting so much easier. What Trump needs to do to protect our constitutional republic from the radical left that wants to destroy the institutions that protect our core freedoms. Who did it, what they did. This book brings the receipts, whether it be the lawfare against Trump, the attacks on clean and fair elections, the attacks on your First Amendment freedoms, the left's efforts to destroy America through woke racism and division and hatred. The details here will astonish you. Go to Rights and Freedoms in Peril. Great new book for the new Trump era. Great new book for Christmas for the patriots in your life. Rights and Freedoms in Peril, judicialwatchbook.com. So one thing that's not in the book, well, maybe it is in the book. Yeah, I think we talked about Fani Willis in the book. I know we talked about Fani Willis in the book. But the development since the book was published is what I want to talk to you about now. Now, if you've been following us in the last few weeks, you know that Fani Willis was found in default in our open records lawsuit on records about her communications with the January 6th committee, the Pelosi operation, Jack Smith, Biden Justice Department. And she was found in default by the court, found in violation of the law, ordered to search for and give us documents that she had said she previously didn't have. Lo and behold, she does have documents, and now she's withholding them from us. So we've asked for more relief from the court, and I described what we were doing in this video earlier this week.
Big news out of Georgia, everyone. Fani Willis and her office have been disqualified from the prosecution of President Trump. The prosecution, at least.
Well, everyone, we're back in court again against Fani Willis. Judicial Watch just filed a brief today in our case for records about her collusion with the Pelosi January 6th operation, the Biden DOJ operation, specifically Jack Smith. Now, you may recall she was found in default in this lawsuit. She didn't show up in court to answer our lawsuit, and the court ordered her to search for records she says, I don't have. Well, it turns out she does have records, and she confessed to having records of her communications, her office's communications, with the Pelosi January 6th operation, but she doesn't want to turn the records over to us now. So first she tells us she has no records. She doesn't bother to answer our lawsuit. Court orders her to be in default, violation of the law. And then she searches for records, and now she doesn't want to turn them over? Well, we just filed a brief asking the court to review the records she's hiding from the American people. Plus, we've asked for a special master to oversee a full search for records about her collusion. For instance, it looks like they didn't search cell phone text messages and other records they were supposed to look for. So this is a major scandal because what happened to Trump is the worst corruption in American history. The collusive, political, corrupt prosecutions of him and the conspiracy, it looks like, between Fani Willis, the Biden operation, and the Pelosi operation, and who knows who else. Yeah, and so we filed this motion in court, and the motion essentially asks the court to review the documents in camera, which means the court gets to look at them directly, outside the public, outside sight of the public, and decide on his own whether the material is being withheld properly. And secondly, we have this issue about the scope of the search and whether the search was diligent or not. And we don't think it was, and this is what we say in the brief. And this is why we're asking for a special master, which is a court-appointed official that could oversee a diligent search. Willis, by her own admission, conducted at least 3 searches before finding any responsive documents not already supplied by Judicial Watch. She did not even bother to conduct a search until the complaint was filed. Her records custodian says he does not know the Celebrite, which is a digital investigations program or equipment he apparently had a hand in ordering, can be used to search cell phone texts and other data. Moreover, the custodian had no standard practice for conducting searches and keeps no records of the methods used in a given search. The foregoing gives rise to a grave suspicion that all responsive records have not been found. The court should appoint a special master to supervise and monitor the record searches. The special master should have authority to audit searches and conduct searches herself. She should also have authority to hire such consultants and experts as may be needed to execute her commission. Special master should also make a recommendation to the court as to how her fees and expenses should be allocated among the parties, taking into consideration whether she finds responsive records that Willis should have found but did not. So as we note, Fani Willis can't be trusted, which is why Judicial Watch is asking the court to review her secret anti-Trump collusion records for a special master and to review her secret anti-collusion records, and why we request a special master to handle the search for more records. The court should put an end to Willis's shell games to hide her conspiracy with Pelosi's January 6th committee, and who knows who else to get Trump. So one of the things the court also found in finding her in default, because she didn't show up to answer, was that we would get attorney's fees, or we could get attorney's fees. So we filed the necessary forms, and the court had a hearing about this and the other issues today. And so let's go to a video of that hearing. We were represented by John Monroe. I think I'm getting his name. I don't want to misstate his name, but he's our local counsel in Fulton County there. Excellent lawyer. He's been practicing for over 30 years. So Mr. Monroe was representing us, and you'll see next to Mr. Monroe, our Judicial Watch attorney who works for us directly, who's been handling it for us, Russ Nobile, a senior lawyer for Judicial Watch. And the judge ably summarizes the issue here. Let's listen to how the judge talked about the case here. Let's bring that up.
Judicial Watch filed an Open Records Act request with the District Attorney's Office. They were informed there were no responsive records. The request was, in general, I'm not going to get it exactly right. Please share all communications with Jack Smith in connection with his work on the January 6th investigation and any of his employees, as well as any communications between the District Attorney's Office and the committee or commission that was investigating the January 6th situation. That was more or less the request, but the response was, we don't have anything. Mr. Monroe and perhaps Mr. Nobile were surprised by that answer. Ultimately, they brought the lawsuit that is before me, seeking to compel compliance with the Open Records Act and for the disgorgement of responsive records. The current posture is that the district attorney is in default. The default order gave the district attorney's office a pretty tight time frame in which to do what it had been asked to do by Judicial Watch originally through the Open Records Act request, which was to produce these documents. And one document was produced. I believe it was something that actually Mr. Monroe had provided the district attorney's office, saying, here's a reason why we think there might be some things. And that was handed back.
Yeah. Congress had released the letter.
As well, there was a response that said, well, and these aren't the exact words, but either we looked for the first time or we looked again, and there are some things, but you can't have them because they are privileged or for whatever reason, they are not under the terms of the ORA properly disclosable. And so here we are. Mr. Monroe is seeking on behalf of Judicial Watch two things. Only one is ripe for discussion, and that's the attorney's fees. There is also a pending motion to have a special master appointed to clear up some of the mystery around how could the first answer be we have nothing, and then the second answer is we have something, but you can't have it.
Well, there you have the judge kind of signal where he might be going. Of course, we don't know that because the other side hasn't responded to our brief yet. They have some time to do that. And at the hearing, the lawyer for Fani Willis's office, it's interesting. So in Washington, when we do a FOIA lawsuit, you, let's say ICE or Judicial Watch sues the CIA. Now, the CIA, their lawyers kind of are involved, but they're represented essentially as an agency by the Justice Department. So the Justice Department represents the agencies in the FOIA lawsuits. That's why I'm so upset about the way the Justice Department behaves, because they defend all of this secrecy when we get the runaround under the FOIA. So down in Fulton County, there's kind of a similar issue with the county, I guess the county district attorney or the county attorneys and the district attorney's office. So you have essentially the equivalent of another office full of lawyers representing this agency, the district attorney, in this FOIA lawsuit. So the lawyer there doesn't necessarily work in Fani Willis's office. She's representing Fani Willis's office, and she's a county attorney. She said during the hearing, because typically settlement discussions are, if we hear the government wants to settle, we typically don't talk about it. You just don't talk about settlement negotiations in public until, otherwise no one's ever going to settle. But here she disclosed that she was interested in a global settlement with Judicial Watch. Well, we'll see if we get there. And our lawyer, John Monroe, again, our local counsel for Judicial Watch, talked about the issues, and you'll see the arguments summarized or highlighted in this next video as John represents you, Judicial Watch supporter, before the judge against Fani Willis's office.
The problem we have is we don't know what we don't know. They've said we've got some stuff, but you can't see it. So I guess all we know to do, the only tool in our toolbox is, well, I guess it's two-pronged one, the in-camera inspection and the special master.
Sure.
We know that, like, for example, Mr. Bond said at his deposition that when their first response of, we don't have any records, he admitted in his deposition, we never searched.
Right.
And then the second time, after the case was filed, they said we don't have any records, not even privileged records. And now they're saying, well, we do have some records, but they're privileged. So we don't have a lot of confidence in whatever it is they're doing when they say they're searching. And so since we don't know what's there, it's hard for us to come up with any kind of proposal short of what we've asked the court to do in terms of trying to remedy this.
Right.
And I don't know, for example, that we could even come up with an agreement on attorney's fees because we don't know what's going to happen going forward. For example, if the court, appointed a special master, there might be meetings with the special master, there might be more hearings. There could be a lot more work involved. So at this point, it's hard for us to say we'd settle for this. Because as you point out, it's not a bus accident. We can't just say this is how much money we need and we'll be happy and we'll go away.
Right.
Originally, there was just an acknowledgement receiving the request. And then the next day, there was can you please clarify it? And then 5 minutes later, before there was an opportunity to do any clarification, it was, we don't have any responsive records. I'm not sure Judicial Watch even had seen the request for clarification before the we don't have any records came.
Okay, so you received an acknowledgement. Thank you for making a request.
Mm-hmm.
Next day, could you clarify or narrow it? And before really someone could take a breath, then we don't have it.
That's right. And then Mr. Bond admitted, confessed, whatever, during his deposition that, in fact, no search was done before that response of we don't have any records was created. That's in his deposition transcript on page 76, line 7. Because we had the one letter that we attached to the complaint, then we knew that can't be correct. There must be some responsive records. So we filed the complaint. And then after the complaint was filed, Mr. Bond said that he searched again, and he said in his deposition that was largely by asking people if the office had any records. That's in his deposition, page 53, line 15. And then during his deposition, despite repeated questions, trying to get at it from many different angles, Mr. Bond was not able to give a comprehensive description of what search was done and how it was done or anything like that.
Bond is
and then even after the court's order, the response that came in, which we filed into the record, it was undated, it was unsigned, it was just on DA letterhead. There was no privilege log, as you pointed out. And there's not actually even an affirmative response saying, we have some stuff, but you can't have it. It just said that stuff would be privileged. So we still aren't sure if they actually did a search and have, identified any records that are responsive, because what they said was, oh, well, that would be privileged. They started by not doing a search at all, even though they said they did. And then they apparently didn't really conduct a meaningful search. And then at least their third opportunity, they gave us an undated, unsigned, unprivileged log thing saying that if they had records, they'd be privileged. That certainly lacks substantial justification, Your Honor. That's not how open records requests are supposed to be dealt with by a government agency. They said they searched and didn't. I mean, they admitted they didn't search, and where they conducted actually the way they worded it, they conducted 2 more searches and still found no records when in fact, that was after we had filed the complaint and attached a letter that they should have recognized was responsive. They still said they didn't have anything responsive.
It was a letter Fani Willis.
I mean, they lack substantial justification.
January 6th committee.
At least for the most of the time. I think it's premature for us to know what they did the third time around, and that's why we're asking for the special master and the in-camera inspection. But it's patently obvious that they lack substantial justification in saying we did a search when in fact they didn't do a search. And then when they did a search and didn't even find what we had already said, hey, here's a responsive record, they didn't even find that.
I think that's it. So, and our lawyer went on to describe the fees we've spent, at least as of the date we filed our request for fees, or documented the fees. And it's about, the attorney's fees and costs are about $22,000. And as our lawyer notes, that's before we get into the further litigation potentially. So we'll see, we want the documents in the end, right? It's if the court awards us fees, so be it. But in the end, we really want the documents. And what I liked about this hearing, I'm glad it was public, because it gives you an opportunity to see what we have to put up with and what we have to do. It's like everything is a fight. I keep on saying we got to sue to get the time of day. And in the case of Fani Willis, she had literally written a letter to the head of the January 6th committee. We asked for records that obviously would have covered the production of that letter, communications with the January 6th committee, and they said they didn't have anything. And the letter finally gets released by the Republicans in Congress saying, what about this? And that's why we're in court now, and that's why they've been, court seemingly is skeptical about how they've handled the case, and rightly so. So things are going to be on hold for a little bit, obviously, because we're coming up on Christmas and a New Year's holiday. We're not all monsters here. We're not going to I'm not going to make our lawyers work on Christmas over a fee dispute with the government, with the Fulton County. But and the court noted, they have 30 days to respond, so there's not much we can do anyway. So we'll see if we can get them to give us documents or more information about their secret documents, and maybe just get the documents. I mean, that's what we want in the end, are the documents. And I think we have a stronger case to get these documents, since now this case is a dead letter as far as this prosecutor is concerned, because an appellate court in Georgia also last week found that Fani Willis is disqualified as a result of an appearance of a conflict of impropriety in her handling of the case against Donald Trump and others. And this is the video I did want to play for you on that topic.
Big news out of Georgia, everyone. Fani Willis and her office have been disqualified from the prosecution of President Trump. The prosecution, at least for now, is dead. It's going to have to be picked up by another prosecutor in Georgia. And I don't think they're going to be able to find anyone who is as corrupt as Fani and will pursue President Trump on sham charges. Now, of course, she's been disqualified over her corruption, hiring her boyfriend, helping line her own pockets, and funding her relationship through the prosecution and abuse of President Trump. A terrible miscarriage of justice down there. This comes on top of the Judicial Watch lawsuit for which she was found in default for not responding to the lawsuit for our request for documents about her communications with the Pelosi gang and Jack Smith in the Biden Justice Department. She's hiding documents now. Turns out she had documents she said she didn't have. and we've got a court hearing tomorrow on them. So Fani Willis is finally being held accountable, not only by the courts, but by Judicial Watch. And it's the first in what should be many steps of accountability and justice over the outrageous lawfare targeting President Trump.
So big victory for President Trump and other victims of Fani Willis's outrageous prosecution. As you know, or should know if you've been following Judicial Watch at all, she has been caught red-handed, basically misusing this prosecution process to employ her boyfriend at the time, Nathan Wade, which raises questions about the whole basis for the prosecution. You had the political content of it, which makes it, in my view, illicit, but also you have the likelihood and the evidence that it was initiated and pursued to provide funds for her and her friends' romantic relationship and to advance it. And it looks like they lied repeatedly to the courts about it and to the public. The lower court, in finding her or requiring her to fire or keep Nathan Wade out of the case while leaving her in, even acknowledged that there was an odor of mendacity about how this issue was handled by her. Yet despite that, she was allowed to remain on the case and prosecuted. And that's why Trump and his fellow co-defendants appealed it, and the court agreed with Trump. After carefully considering the trial court's findings in its order, this is on page 17, we conclude that it erred by failing to disqualify D.A. Willis in her office. The remedy crafted by the trial court to prevent an ongoing appearance of impropriety, meaning having Nathan Wade be thrown off the case, did nothing to address the appearance of impropriety that existed at times when D.A. Willis was exercising her broad pretrial discretion about who to prosecute and what charges to bring. While we recognize that an appearance of impropriety generally is not enough to support disqualification, this is the rare case in which disqualification is mandated and no other remedy will suffice to restore public confidence in the integrity of these proceedings. Accordingly, we reverse the trial court's denial, and we conclude that the elected district attorney is wholly disqualified from this case. The assistant district attorney's only power to prosecute a case is derived from the constitutional authority of the district attorney who appointed them, have no authority to proceed. Now, what the appellate court did not do is dismiss the case in its entirety. It dismissed the indictment in its entirety, which I think the court should have done, and it may eventually happen. So what happens next? Well, first of all, there's no case, so what are the privileges? To withhold documents, right? So to me, this is another indication that the documents should be released to Judicial Watch about her collusion to get Trump. But secondly, what's going to happen to the case against Trump, which is still being used by the Democrats? They're holding this case and the sham case up in New York like a sword of Damocles over President Trump during his entire presidency, or at least that's the goal. And it goes to a state official in Georgia who can decide to give it to another prosecutor, and that other prosecutor has independent authority whether to appeal it, or he can, well, you can't see my foot smashing, he can squelch it. He can say there's no basis for a prosecution here and just kill the case outright at the state level, which I think should be the outcome. Now, Fani Willis is appealing this decision to disqualify her to the state Supreme Court. I don't know if it will succeed or not, but it will delay the outcome somewhat. And I don't know if the appeal is enough to, if her appealing it to the Supreme Court, does it delay the state officials' opportunity to move the case or handle the case or shut the case down? I don't know. But I do know that Judicial Watch will continue to hold Fani Willis accountable under the law and everyone else who was involved in the lawfare against Trump. And I don't know what the Justice Department's going to do, what President Trump personally is going to do. As I've suggested to you, I think he should directly appoint a special counsel out of the White House. Justice Department can't be trusted to investigate the Justice Department. The FBI can't be trusted to investigate the FBI. So how can we expect them to run those investigations into themselves? I can't, nor should you expect them to do that. And nor should the president. And that's why he should appoint an outside special prosecutor as which is his authority, which he has the authority to do under the Constitution. But in the meantime, we've got this case against Fani Willis that will continue, and hopefully we'll get more documents on this, the worst corruption scandal in American history, the Democratic Party left-wing effort enabled by the media and politicians across the country who wanted to get Trump and use the awesome power of prosecutorial authority to jail Trump and worse, to keep him out of office and to interfere with our elections. So Judicial Watch will continue the heavy lifting in that regard. So before I go, I'm just told that Congress or the House passed this continuing resolution. I think we have a screen. There's the final vote. Sure. Okay. So all the Democrats voted for it. You had Republicans and Democrats voting overwhelmingly to keep the government open, to fully fund everything the Republicans said they were against during the election. So you can draw your own conclusions whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But the government's going to be open. I expect, given the Democrat support, there will be similar bipartisan support in the Senate with the establishment Republicans working with the Democrats to fully fund the Biden agenda for 3 months. Why wouldn't they? But it doesn't mean that Republicans and conservatives won't have opportunities to fix some of this once Trump comes into office. But in the meantime, the worst of the worst in terms of government spending will continue. And it didn't have to be that way if we had more effective and better leadership out of the House and the Senate from Republicans, not Democrats, but from Republicans. It's too bad. So with that, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. On behalf of all of my colleagues here at Judicial Watch, we are grateful for your support throughout the year. And Christmas is always a time for charities, and Judicial Watch is a charity, to make the pitch. It's the season of giving. And I encourage you, if you aren't supporting Judicial Watch, to support us. I tell you, just this last year or two, we've cleaned up 4 million names from the voting rolls. I'm convinced that the election would not have been as clean and fair as it was, although it needed work, certainly at certain places like California and such, but the presidential level, but for Judicial Watch's activities. Frankly, I think President Trump would have been put in jail, but for Judicial Watch standing up against the abuses of power targeting him. Certainly we contributed to protecting him from that lawfare and protecting the rule of law, the U.S. Constitution, as a result. And you name it, whether it be elections, immigration, censorship, the COVID issue, the FBI abuses of American citizens, holding members of Congress accountable, stopping and trying to sue the the woke racism behind reparations and other abuses like that in our military academies, with the woke training that our military academies have been put through. All of that exposed by Judicial Watch just recently and pursued by Judicial Watch just in the last year or two. So there's few doing more than Judicial Watch to uphold the rule of law, and I don't know where America would be without Judicial Watch. So as you consider who to give to at the end of the year and part of your Christmas giving, I encourage you to support Judicial Watch, because I think we have earned your support as we try to defend the Republic. And as you know, there's always more heavy lifting to do. And during the Trump administration, I think our work will actually increase, because there'll be more opportunities, hopefully, under the Trump administration to get the truth. And we got to be there to ask for it and pursue it. And we'll be there, I hope, with your support. So with that, I wish you and yours a wonderful and Merry Christmas. And I'll see you, I don't know if I'll see you here next week, but I'll see you here soon again on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.